What's good? Welcome in. Happy Monday to all of you. I'm Farzin Vasugi, and thank you all for joining me for this episode of the Chief Zone podcast. Back at it again as free agency continues in the NFL, and the Chiefs not necessarily making any big splashes out there, but they're certainly making moves out there. They're staying pretty active in free agency, so there are some things to go over here regarding the Kansas City Chiefs and their activity in free agency. So we will get into that. Obviously, that'll include Kareem Hunt re-signing. Juju Smith-Schuster also re-signed with the Chiefs. The Chiefs also got a pair of quarterbacks they've added to the roster. There's one Chiefs free agent visiting another team. And there's also a player out there who just signed a massive contract, and that does include a key player on Kansas City's roster right now, and it could impact that player's future in Kansas City. Plus some non-Chiefs talk here on this podcast as well. So a lot to get into here on this episode of the Chiefs Zone podcast. I appreciate you all joining me on this Monday. Hope you all got through your Monday, coming off a weekend. Happy St. Patrick's Day to all of you. Hopefully every Chiefs fan celebrated, certainly in one way or another. What's my choice of beer? Definitely Tank 7 and the Stone Cold Steve Austin IPA, as well as the American Lager. I have not had the 316 Lager, the 316 IPA. They had the double IPA. That one, that was like a limited time deal. That was really good. That one I really liked a lot. Cameron says, you look like you're losing weight. Well, thank you, Cameron. Was hoping no one would notice, but I guess people are noticing. I suppose that's a good thing, though, but I appreciate it. All right, let's get things going here. Hey, for those of you who are watching live on Facebook and YouTube, appreciate you guys. If you guys do get a chance, please give this video a like, share it with your friends, let them know that the Chiefs Zone podcast is live. And even if people listen after the live stream, that still helps as well. So it would be greatly appreciated for you guys to share that and spread the word about the Chiefs Zone podcast. Let's get right into it here. Very little time to waste as the Chiefs have been very busy in free agency. Again, like I said earlier, not a lot of big splashes, noise being made by the Chiefs in free agency. And I think that's okay. I think if you're a Chiefs fan, you came into this season knowing that with the cap limitations and all of these things, there are going to be some difficult off seasons, and I think this is one of them right now. But I think the Chiefs are kind of figuring things out as we go along here. I was really excited when the Chiefs brought back Hollywood Brown. I was not really sure if that move would happen. You have Hollywood Brown, you have Rashee Rice pending an injury, or I'm sorry, suspension, and you have Xavier Worthy, who looked like he was in a little bit of trouble at one point. Now it looks like he's in the clear. Doesn't seem like that story is completely done yet, but it does seem like from a legal standpoint, Xavier Worthy is not in the wrong from the DA standpoint. But we'll see what happens as the story goes along, because it doesn't look like it's going away anytime soon. But the Chiefs do bring back a very important part of their offense, and that is re-signing Kareem Hunt. And I was pretty excited about this. A lot of Chiefs fans were very excited about Kareem Hunt coming back to the team. This was announced, what day was it? I think Friday afternoon is when this move was announced, and it was official today. Kareem Hunt did sign that contract to stay in Kansas City. If you look at Kareem Hunt's numbers, it's not the greatest if you're just judging off stats. And there are a lot of people who obviously just judge off stats. Kareem Hunt led the team in rushing, of course, 728 yards. He averaged 3.6 yards per carry. That's not great. If we're being completely honest, that's not very good. But why is this move so important? Why are people excited that Kareem Hunt's coming back? Well, I think one reason why is when the Chiefs were dealing with all of those injuries last year with Rice, with Hollywood, Pacheco. I mean, it was just a plethora of injuries, especially on the offensive side of the football. They needed help. They were looking everywhere. And I'm sure Jerick McKinnon was someone who they considered during the first quarter of last season. I even said right after the Pacheco injury, I said maybe it is or not Pacheco. Yeah, it was a Pacheco injury, actually. I said it might be time to bring back Kareem Hunt and give him a second chance. And that's exactly what happened. Unfortunately, in the first game Kareem Hunt played was also the same game Rice suffered his season-ending injury. So they bring in Kareem Hunt, and obviously I think he played a big part in that 9-0 start for Kansas City. Again, when you look at the stats, it certainly does not look like it. But if you actually watch the games, and a lot of you guys have, Kareem Hunt helped the Chiefs in a lot of situations. And I think the short yardage situations were certainly where Kareem Hunt helped elevate the Chiefs, give them a nice little boost. Because that Chiefs offense needed something. They were down with their two veteran wide receivers, Hollywood Brown and Rashee Rice, and those two had been working out together a lot in the offseason. Hollywood Brown and Patrick Mahomes, they seem to have gotten into a rhythm in the offseason. And I know OTAs and training camp, that's not where games are won, but that is where you can start to develop something so it can translate to wins. And unfortunately, we never really saw the Mahomes and Hollywood connection pan out. In fact, all the hype last year was Hollywood, Rice, and Worthy. I still remember in training camp every single day up until Hollywood's injury, the three of them would walk down that ramp. There's like the practice field at where the Chiefs have training camp at Northwest Missouri State. Is it? Yeah, it is Northwest Missouri State. As they're going down, there's this ramp that leads them to the practice field. So for those who've seen the social media clips of the players coming on the field and everything, smiling, looking at the fans and all of that, that's that little walkway path that leads to the practice field. And every single day in training camp, those three guys were walking side by side together. And when those injuries happened, the Chiefs, I mean, Xavier Worthy was your number one wide receiver. He was shoved into a situation and a role that he was absolutely not ready for. So they had to bring back Kareem Hunt, who had some familiarity with the offense. And from what we have heard was that the Chiefs had kept in contact with Kareem Hunt. So he certainly had that connection there with Patrick Mahomes, Travis Kelce. He and Kelce are both Ohio guys. So I think when you look at Kareem Hunt, that the short yardage situations, that's where he really helped Kansas City. And obviously, I think DeAndre Hopkins, who has now moved on and signed with the Baltimore Ravens, I think his presence certainly helped. I know Hopkins didn't do a whole lot of things, at least on a consistent basis, that really impressed you during his time in Kansas City, which was about a little over half a season. But I think his presence was certainly helpful, because that's when you noticed Patrick Mahomes, his interception numbers dropped drastically once DeAndre Hopkins was part of the fold. But when you look at Kareem Hunt, I think the one key stat with Kareem Hunt is he had 42 first downs on the ground. That is 28th in the NFL. And keep in mind, this is someone who was on the shelf for all of the 2024 offseason because he was recovering from the offseason surgery, didn't play the first 3 games, played it in the 4th game. That was the game against the LA Chargers, the same game where Rashee Rice had that knee injury. And in that game, what did Kareem Hunt do? He was responsible on the game-winning drive for the Chiefs. He was responsible for 25 yards of total offense. And they capped it off with a Samaje Perine touchdown. Perine, of course, we talked about last podcast. He has moved on and is returning back to Cincinnati. I think this is very important for the Chiefs to bring back Kareem Hunt. I know he turns 30 years old in August, which is going to be in the midst of training camp there. Yeah, that's a high number age-wise for running backs in the NFL. I get that. But I think if he was your number one down-for-down running back, that'd be a concern. I think there's some hope out there that Isaiah Pacheco can go back to his 2022 rookie form or his 2023 form where he was really helpful and a big part of Kansas City's offense. Remember in 2022, you heard all these announcers talking about, oh my God, how are the Chiefs going to survive without Tyreek Hill? Oh boy, this Chiefs team is doomed. except they went to 3 straight Super Bowls without Tyreek Hill, winning 2 of them back to back. Sure, the last one was obviously atrocious, not good. Not good if you're Kansas City. Everyone else loved that. But Pacheco was a big part of that offense. And I remember in 2022, a lot of the announcers, as the season went on, started to talk about how they were just asking that question. How did Isaiah Pacheco get drafted in the 7th round? This guy almost went undrafted in 2022. Obviously, last year, not a good year for Isaiah Pacheco. In fact, I would even argue the last 2 postseasons, both the 2023 postseasons on the road to Super Bowl 58 and last year on the road to Super Bowl 59, Pacheco just didn't really perform well. He had his lowest yard per carry average of his career. What did he average? 3.7 yards per carry? Yeah, that's by far the lowest he's had. I mean, he's been in the high 4s the first 2 years of his career, if I'm not mistaken. And I'm pulling that up right now just to be sure. Yeah, he had a 4.9 yard per carry average in his rookie season, which is really good. Also had a 4.6 in 2023. That is good as well. A big step back last year, almost 1 whole yard less on average. So I think the hope is that Isaiah Pacheco is fully recovered this offseason and that Kareem Hunt, and I mentioned earlier, keep in mind with Kareem Hunt, this is someone who joined the team in week 3, but didn't play until week 4. Kareem Hunt, even if he was to get signed by a team in the offseason, he was recovering from offseason surgery. So he never had the chance to go through OTAs or training camp. Now, he was a free agent the entire time, but even if he was signed elsewhere, he would have not had that opportunity because he was recovering. Well, now, the good part about having Kareem Hunt signed in mid-March is that he'll go through the offseason workout program, and then that turns into OTAs, and then they'll have that little break there, and that'll transition to training camp in St. Joe. I think that, to me, is a very important part of this Chiefs team. I've said before, when you have good depth, because look at the Chiefs team right now, and I know Rice was in the top 5 in receptions, yards, and touchdown grabs among receivers last year up until his injury. We can't really call him elite yet because he's got to have that full season where he's performing at a very high level. Not that there's ever a good time for an injury, but I guess the good news for Rice, where he's had that injury, he's had almost a full year to recover by the time the regular season starts. And yeah, we are expecting that suspension as well. Not that it's a good thing, especially with what he did. But the way I see it from a football standpoint, that suspension, and I've said this before, I think that suspension is going to be a less amount of games than what some people are anticipating. If that suspension comes today, we have to wait for the court date later this summer. But Rice will come back from a suspension and provide a nice little boost for the offense. And dear football gods, I hope Worthy and Hollywood stay healthy, because we were talking all year long about the trio of Rice, Hollywood, and Worthy, and we never got that. Never got that. Hollywood got hurt on the first snap of the preseason, and Rice got hurt very early on in the season. So hopefully the 3 of them, we get to see that trio, because I think that's going to go a really long way for this Chiefs offense. I think it'll give Patrick Mahomes the options he needs. And don't forget, you have Travis Kelce, who I think can have slightly better numbers where you have all of those guys spread out, excuse me. And then I think when you have Pacheco, and going back to Kareem Hunt, when you have good depth, and this is what I was trying to get to, it does put less pressure on the number 1 receiver and the number 1 running back, because they're not going to be used as frequently. They're going to be splitting time with other guys at their position here. So I think with Kareem Hunt re-signing rather, I think you can expect him and Pacheco to split carries in 2025. And Kareem Hunt is no stranger to that, because that is something that he did in Cleveland when Nick Chubb was there. They formed a really good duo. And that played a really big hand in Cleveland, that really good season they had in 2021, which came to an end in the hands of the Kansas City Chiefs. But I think at the end of the day, I just like the depth on this offense, which leads me to my next point with Juju Smith-Schuster re-signing. And I know Juju Smith-Schuster is not the receiver he once was during his time in Pittsburgh or in the 2022 season, which we've already talked about and how good of a season that was for the Chiefs offense. I was not expecting Juju to come back. And there is the rumor out there that McCole Hardman, he is currently visiting the Chicago Bears. Obviously, you've got some Chiefs connections there. Joe Thuney just went there. Eric Bieniemy is there. I know he's not the offensive coordinator, but I would imagine he has a little bit of influence in trying to maybe let the Bears know, hey, let's get McCole Hardman. Obviously, Ryan Poles, very familiar with the Chiefs and everything they've done. So that certainly would make sense if McCole Hardman ends up signing there. My biggest fear is that Hardman, who's got a great skill set, just thrives. I mean, the thing about McCole Hardman, and I know everyone thinks about the touchdown catch against the 49ers in the Super Bowl to win the game in overtime, which, listen, McCole Hardman, he's not going to be he's not going into the Chiefs Hall of Fame. But if there was such thing, like in the UFC, they induct fights into the Hall of Fame. If you could induct plays into the Pro Football Hall of Fame or into the Chiefs Hall of Fame, McCole Hardman's touchdown, I mean, that is a historic, iconic moment. Maybe the most iconic moment in Chiefs history. I suppose we could maybe do a March Madness bracket for that. But my biggest fear is that McCole Hardman maybe thrives elsewhere, but we can't really worry too much about that. I mean, the Chiefs have tried everything with him, given him so many chances. With his skill set, you give him opportunities, but so many injuries and just not being able to thrive. Even last year with all the injuries, just didn't work out. But with Juju, he had that big 130-yard game against the Saints. And again, that was when, you were without Hollywood, Rice, Pacheco by that point. But Juju obviously suffered that injury. And when he came back, played a small role. He was huge in that AFC Championship game. I saw the comments. A couple people were saying that, Juju did nothing last year. I think the Buffalo Bills defense would beg to differ. If you were to tell the Buffalo Bills defense that Juju did nothing for the Chiefs last year, they would disagree instantly. I mean, they had a very difficult time. Kind of reminded me of Marquez Valdes-Scantling's performance also against the Bills in the postseason before, where he had two monster catches, both for 30 yards, 29 yards at least. That's what Juju did against the Bills in that AFC title game. The way I'm looking at the offense right now, your top four wide receivers, and I don't know in what order, but I would imagine Hollywood, Rice, Worthy, and Juju. I think those are your top four guys. Running back position, it's Pacheco and Hunt. And you have Elijah Mitchell there. I think the Chiefs really like Elijah Mitchell. You also have Keontae Ingram, who's been around the team for a while now. Carson Steele, part of that mix as well. I know the Chiefs really like Carson Steele in the preseason, but after lack of ball security early on last year, you saw Carson Steele's involvement and touches just completely drop. But I think ultimately, Mahomes has the tools to work with. And no, this is not, like a Jamar Chase and a T. Higgins type of receiving corp. No. And I'll get into that later on because that is getting a lot of attention and a lot of interesting reactions today. But I think when you just look at the Chiefs and what they have, Rice can certainly make that big step forward. He was already doing that last year up until his injury. Xavier Worthy's progress was very similar to Rice's progress. Pretty quiet earlier on in the season. Yeah, he had those 2 touchdowns in the first game against Baltimore. But as the season went on, Worthy was pretty quiet after that for a while, up until mid to late November, started to go on a little bit of a spree there. And if I'm not mistaken, co-led all rookies in total touchdowns, had some rushing and receiving touchdowns. And that doesn't surprise any of us because we know Andy Reid. That's why they traded up to get him. Andy Reid knows how to utilize a player like Xavier Worthy. And then you have Hollywood Brown, who can certainly get some separation from defenders and do a lot of damage with his speed. Juju Smith-Schuster. I mean, listen, his blocking is certainly key. I think that's a big reason why they're bringing him back and adding depth to this offense. I like the way the Chiefs offense is looking. No, there's no standout number one wide receiver or a standout number one running back. Could Xavier Worthy be that guy this year in his second season? Possibly, kind of like Rice last year when he was making that big step forward. Could Rice maybe make another big step forward when he comes back? If he gets suspended, obviously coming back from an injury, that remains to be seen. But for right now, I feel like the Chiefs have a lot of second tier type of players, and that's okay. That's not a bad thing at all. You have a lot of guys who are on rookie deals right now. Rice, Worthy, Pacheco, of those guys we're talking about. Hollywood Brown did not come back for a massive deal. Juju Smith-Schuster coming back on a cheap deal. Kareem Hunt, his deal is a $1.5 million deal with possibly another $1 million added to that with incentives. So I like the way the Chiefs offense is looking. There are still concerns on the left side of the offensive line. I get that. The Jalen Moore thing, I'm still kind of unsure how that's going to go. I mean, I'll be honest, I don't have a big vote of confidence because the Chiefs have not done a good job with the left tackle spot. Obviously, they really wanted Ronnie Stanley. They missed out on that because he re-signed with Baltimore. So they had to settle for him. I think Cam Robinson was one that they really did not want to bring in because of some potential concerns there. So they chose Jalen Moore. I mean, this is another big risk here that the Chiefs are taking at left tackle here. So we'll see how that goes. The Chiefs signed a pair of quarterbacks. They signed Gardner Minshew and Bailey Zappi. Now, the Bailey Zappi signing is unofficial. That has not been done yet. Gardner Minshew officially signed today. That's an interesting one right there. I know Minshew Mania, that was a thing. Didn't Gardner Minshew make his NFL debut against the Chiefs? Do I have that right? Because I remember it was Chiefs Jaguars in 2019. That was when Tyreek Hill got injured. And that was also when Nick Foles got injured. Remember Nick Foles, former Chief, also former Super Bowl MVP with the Eagles. And in his first game with the Jaguars, after signing, what was it, a 4-year, $88 million deal, he got injured in that first game. And I think that's how Gardner Minshew made his debut. And it was against Kansas City. Yeah, he was a 6th-round pick in 2019. Kind of had an interesting run. He threw for 2 touchdowns and 1 pick against the Chiefs, obviously playing unexpectedly. Went on to do some good things for the Jaguars. What did he have? He had 2, 4, 6, 8. He had 9 touchdowns and 1 pick. Now, that was 2019. That was a long time ago. Played for the Raiders. That was their temporary solution for a starting quarterback. Gardner Minshew has a lot of experience as a starting quarterback. So I do like that he's in Kansas City. I think that's a good backup quarterback to have. I know some people may have wanted Carson Wentz to come back. Carson Wentz has just completely fallen off. I still remember the year when Nick Foles and the Eagles won the Super Bowl. That same year, I think Carson Wentz was on his way to winning MVP. Kind of like Derek Carr in 2016, but got hurt in the second to last game of the season. And usually those kinds of awards just don't go to people who suffer injuries late in the season, fair or not. That's just the way it all panned out. Teresa's asking, Zappi, wasn't he with the Patriots? Yes. That was when Belichick pulled Mac Jones. Boy, Mac Jones, whatever happened to him? I actually liked Mac Jones his rookie year. The Patriots had the number 1 seed at one point in 2020. But it just didn't work out. It didn't. They went to the playoffs and they got blown out by the Bills. But the Chiefs, they are also bringing back Bailey Zappi. Now, if you recall, Bailey Zappi was added, I want to say it was right after the preseason. And so the Chiefs went ahead and cut Chris Oladokun, who's still on the roster. and they went forward with Bailey Zappi. But because of the Deshaun Watson injury in Cleveland, obviously they had to shift some quarterbacks around, putting Deshaun Watson on IR, elevating one quarterback from IR to the main roster. Or I'm sorry, not IR, practice squad to the main roster. And they needed a practice squad quarterback, so they got Bailey Zappi. So he was taken away from Kansas City, and that was the domino effect in Kansas City, bringing back Chris Oladokin, who obviously got to make his NFL debut in Week 18 in Denver. But I think at the end of the day, when you're looking at the quarterback situation right now, I think Gardner Minshew is a solid backup quarterback. Now, God forbid you ever have to be in that situation there. I think Gardner Minshew does have the tools to work with. I do think the Chiefs would probably run the ball a little bit more. I still think this is a pass-first football team, which makes sense when Patrick Mahomes is your quarterback. Last year, I would have argued otherwise because of all the injuries and some of the struggles this Chiefs offense had. And I think you saw maybe a more balanced football team. You saw Kareem Hunt run the ball 20-plus times, like 4 games in a row. I mean, I don't think that's ever happened in the Andy Reid era, even pre-Mahomes. So that certainly was different to see, but it definitely helped Kansas City with their 9-0 start to last season. They also add Jerry Tillery to the roster here, defensive lineman, adding some depth here. Former first-round pick with the LA Chargers, played with the Chargers for 4 seasons, played with the Raiders for a couple of years, and then went to the Minnesota Vikings last year, now making his way back to the AFC West. Just didn't really pan out for the LA Chargers there. Had 2 sacks his first year, 3 his second year, 4.5 his third year. Very slow progress in terms of stats go there. Couple of forced fumbles 1 year with the Chargers. I think he only had 2 sacks with the Raiders, and that was more in the second season with the Raiders. This past year with the Vikings, played 17 games, but didn't do much, had 28 total tackles. Not somebody who really got involved much, 5.5 run stuffs there. So was more of a depth guy, and I would imagine that would be his role coming to Kansas City. So we'll see what that'll look like as time goes on here. By the way, real quickly, before we move on here and talk about another big part of our subject today. So we're doing a podcast tonight. I mentioned last week there will not be a Red Friday live chat. We did not have one this past Red Friday. We are not having one this Red Friday because of the NCAA tournament there. I mean, listen, that 96-hour period, I don't think anyone cares about anything else unless there's massive breaking news in the NFL world. Listen, the NFL obviously dominates a lot of headlines. I think that 96-hour period, that's when the NFL takes a backseat, a very rare backseat. So we're going to do the same thing. No Red Friday live chat this Red Friday. And because of that, we'll do 2 podcasts this week. We're obviously doing one tonight, and we'll do another one this Wednesday night. Gonna aim for 7 o'clock Central Time, but that could change a little bit, might be pushed back. So just be on the lookout for that. Like I said, if you're subscribed on YouTube and have the bell notifications turned on, you'll be notified to your smartphone, so you won't have to worry about that. Damn, you all chill out in the comments there. We're having a little bit of a Chiefs Kingdom friendly fire here. Listen, I appreciate all of you guys with your fiery, your passion. Everyone's allowed to have an opinion, but let's keep it cool here, shall we? We greatly appreciate that. But anyway, I wanted to give that housekeeping note here regarding the podcast. So no Red Friday live chat this Red Friday, but we will have a second podcast that will come out on Wednesday. I do want to get into some breaking news that came out this morning regarding the Houston Texans. They signed their cornerback, Derek Stingley, to a 3-year, $90 million deal. Now, a lot of people in Kansas City quickly relating this to Trent McDuffie, which makes a lot of sense because Trent McDuffie is going into the final year of his rookie contract. Yes, there is the option of a 5th-year deal, which the Chiefs are definitely going to pursue because that'll definitely save them a lot of money there. And because Trent McDuffie has not been voted to any Pro Bowls, that number is going to be much lower than I think a lot of people were anticipating there, which, maybe not good for McDuffie, but it is good for Kansas City at the end of the day. And I think they'll definitely try to do the same with George Karlaftis. Here's my thing. I've said this before. And I'm going to say it again. There's a possibility that the Chiefs are going to use the 5th-year option on both McDuffie and Karlaftis. Is there a possibility the Chiefs use the 5th-year option on McDuffie and trade him? Which, by the way, the deadline for the 5th-year option for 2022 draft picks, which can only be applied to first-round draft picks, the deadline for that is May the 1st. It's kind of like a year-long franchise tag in advance, except the pay is much different. There's a possibility that they use the franchise tag, the 5th-year option on both McDuffie and Karlaftis. They might have to choose who they keep. That might seriously be a possibility. And I know Chiefs fans do not want to hear this, because I know Trent McDuffie has certainly become a fan favorite, and rightfully so. I know Trent McDuffie does not thrive statistically, and that's probably why he's never been voted to a Pro Bowl. But damn, man, he's been really, really good. He's been an All-Pro. He's been a first-team All-Pro. You look at George Karlaftis, another guy who doesn't necessarily thrive statistically, has his moments for sure. I mean, he does. Yeah, I mean, listen, don't get me wrong. There are stats out there like pass deflections and pressures applied, but those things are not things that a lot of fans even notice. They just don't. Like, I'll give you an example. A lot of people say, why does Chris Jones not do anything? That's not necessarily true. To ask why Chris Jones doesn't do anything, I mean, that's just not a fair question to ask. Now, I understand Chris Jones had 5 sacks. That's 3rd on the team. I think when you're paying Chris Jones as much as you are, you certainly would expect a higher sack production. I think part of that has to do with better coverage in the secondary, which we know that was an issue and probably played a role in the Chiefs being a half second late. But if you look at Chris Jones last year, and this is according to Pro Football Focus. And listen, I know people have their opinions about Pro Football Focus. I think it's a little weird when fans lean hard on their grades, because a lot of that is very subjective. But as far as pressure goes, pressures applied to opposing quarterbacks, Chris Jones was one of the best in the NFL last year. In fact, if you look, Chris Jones led all interior defensive linemen with 88 pressures. Now, that's regular and postseason. If you just want to look at the regular season, which is the most fair way to look at it, Chris Jones was still one of the league leaders in that category. And I'm waiting for that to load here. Let's see. Chris Jones was 6th. He had 74 pressures last year. To give you an idea, who was ahead of him? Zach Allen of the Broncos with 1 more pressure. That's the only interior defensive lineman who had more. The other players that had more pressures on quarterbacks, Jared Verse, the rookie from the Rams, Jonathan Grenard, Myles Garrett, and Trey Hendrickson. Which makes sense because Trey Hendrickson led the NFL in sacks last year. Those are the only players who had more sacks. If you want to look at players right behind Chris Jones, you have Micah Parsons, who looks like he might break Jamar Chase's record for biggest contract by a non-quarterback. Nick Bosa, Chase Young, Danielle Hunter. I mean, those are some really good edge rushers. You don't see a lot of interior defensive linemen. In fact, the next best interior defensive lineman, I don't know how you say his name, Asa. I'm not even going to attempt the last name, from the Dallas Cowboys. He had 60. That's 14 less than Chris Jones. That's a pretty big gap there among interior defensive linemen. So to circle this back to George Karlaftis, I know that he doesn't necessarily thrive statistically. And I said this on my social media on Facebook and Instagram. I said the Chiefs are going to have to decide possibly between George Karlaftis and Trent McDuffie next offseason. That sounds familiar, doesn't it? Oh, yeah. The Chiefs having to decide between a defensive lineman and a defensive back. Oh, yeah. That's what they did last year. They chose Chris Jones over L'Jarius Sneed. And I think that was the right move. As much as I love L'Jarius Sneed, and the Chiefs certainly could have used him last year at times, unfortunately, Sneed only played, 5 games last year? And that draft pick that Kansas City got, that third round draft pick, is a very high third round pick. So I think Kansas City made the right move with that trade in that decision. They're going to have to do it again. Are they going to go with a defensive lineman again? Or are they going to go with a cornerback? Because remember, you chose not to retain L'Jarius Sneed. Moving forward and hoping that you have Trent McDuffie for the long run. And that decision is going to have to be made within the next 12, maybe 13 months, possibly. Now, I said this today, and I got a lot of pushback. People were saying George Karlaftis is not on the same level quality-wise, value-wise as Trent McDuffie, meaning that people feel Trent McDuffie is a way better cornerback than George Karlaftis is at defensive end. Listen, you guys can have your opinions about that. Our opinions about who really has more, who brings more value to the defense doesn't matter. Because it's the agents who are going to be playing that game. George Karlaftis' agent, he's going to make his sales pitch to Brett Veach as to why he brings a lot of value, and Trent McDuffie's agent is going to do the same thing. And listen, as much as it sucks between having to decide between two players and their agents kind of trying to compete for the better contract, that's the way it works. Yeah, again, have the opinion all you want that if you think George Karlaftis is not at an elite level and that Trent McDuffie should be priority number one, fine. But if Trent McDuffie is demanding a massive contract, which, by the way, for Derek Stingley, it's a 3-year, $90 million deal, it's going to be hard to go with McDuffie over Karlaftis. Again, I've said this before, not because you think that McDuffie's bad, not at all. That's not the case here. It's because there is a salary cap and you have to pick and choose. This is not the Cincinnati Bengals where they only have 4 great players: Burrow, Chase, Higgins, and Hendrickson. I mean, this is a Kansas City Chiefs football team that's drafted so damn well. And I keep saying this, I'm a broken record at this point. The Chiefs have drafted so well, they keep running into the situation to where they can't keep everyone. We saw that with Tyreek Hill. We saw that with L'Jarius Sneed. We saw it this year with Joe Thuney, trading players away. We've seen them let guys like Tyrann Mathieu walk. But they're still winning a lot of football games. That's the difference here. So the Chiefs, as much as I hate to say it, they're going to have to decide between Karlaftis and McDuffie next year. And that Derek Stingley contract certainly does not help Kansas City. Listen, here's my thing with the Chiefs. I'm obviously not the general manager. If I was, I mean, this team would be doomed. But listen, we all follow football closely. I think, we have a good logic of how these things work. People are aware that there is a salary cap. But let me just say this. How should the Kansas City Chiefs handle this dynasty? Because when you have someone as talented as Patrick Mahomes, you have to maximize his potential his entire time in Kansas City. You can't waste any opportunities here. So what do? I've said this before, but I'll say it again because I think it's worth repeating. You go out there and you give him the best offensive line possible. You've already locked up Patrick Mahomes long-term for a long period of time. Great. But I think the next most important thing is to make sure that you have the right offensive line protecting him. That's why they prioritized Trey Smith and Creed Humphrey, 2 young guys from the same draft class who are going to be around for a long time. Well, with Trey Smith, we don't know yet. I'm optimistic he'll end up staying. And the Chiefs will get a long-term deal done eventually with him. But for right now, he's still on the team. Joe Thuney, a lot of people would argue he's the best of those 3 interior offensive linemen. Unfortunately, Joe Thuney was the odd man out because he is older and does take up more cap space. I mean, listen, it was either a hole at left guard or a hole at right guard. That's what Kansas City had to decide. I said this year, I thought it was going to be between Nick Bolton and Trey Smith. They found a way to keep both of them, which I think is really good. but they've got to figure out the left side of that offensive line. But I think in general, listen, have the Chiefs gotten every draft pick right? No, not at all. But they have scored high on a lot of them. That 2022 draft class, even Darian Kennard, who's no longer on the team, went to Philly this past season. That entire draft class knows nothing but Super Bowl appearances. The 2022 draft class for the Chiefs, they've all won the Super Bowl their first 2 years. And then from the Chiefs side, was it 9 of them? Made another Super Bowl appearance. Darian Kennard on the Eagles won. Not that Darian Kennard did anything, but he's got a ring, a third ring. The only guy who got the three-peat this year is Darian Kennard. And if I'm not mistaken, is he the first player in NFL history to not only win 3 in a row, but do it in his first 3 years? I believe so. Yeah, Ogle says Darian Kennard three-peated. That was the only three-peat we got this year. And then look at the year before, 2021. You had Creed Humphrey, you had Nick Bolton, you had Trey Smith. They're all staying for now, and I say for now because we don't know about Trey Smith and his long-term future with the Chiefs. They also locked up Noah Gray. I think a lot of people forget about that. Brett Veach has locked down that entire 2021 draft class. That's pretty impressive. And Kansas City really needed that because there were some really good players from that draft class. 2022, that's coming up soon. You got to decide what you want to do with Isaiah Pacheco. Sky Moore, I would imagine, gets one more crack at trying to prove a lot of doubters wrong. Brian Cook, I mean, he's been a solid safety for you, not as good as a Justin Reed or Juan Thornhill when Thornhill was in Kansas City, who, by the way, just moved on, was cut by Cleveland. Who did he sign with? Who did Juan Thornhill just sign with? The Steelers. Yeah, that's where he's going. So there's that. Pacheco, of course, part of that. Watson, Williams. Chiefs have some very difficult decisions to make next offseason with that 2022 draft class. Here's my thing. Listen, I know that 2022 draft class, we're in love with those players there. Just be ready because you're not going to be able to bring back all of them. The Patriots, they were unsuccessful in bringing back every single player. A lot of them were fan favorites, but they still found a way because they had Tom Brady. They had a great offensive line and a lot of offensive linemen who stayed long-term, and they drafted really well at all the other positions. And they may have not made a lot of massive free agent moves. I mean, Randy Moss was a massive one. But in general, they didn't go out there constantly trying to look for the best free agent available every year. They drafted really, really well for a long time. I think that played a big part in their success. Go look up the New England Patriots All Dynasty team. And they have it on their Wikipedia page. You'll notice a lot of those players were draft selections. And Brett Veach, has he gotten every move right? I just said no. Offensive tackle has been a concern for a while. People said Veach can't find a wide receiver. I think Veach has graduated from that narrative. I mean, Brett Veach has gotten a lot of things right in the draft. Again, no NFL team, no general manager bats 1,000 on draft picks. But if there's a team out there that scored really high on draft picks rounds 1 through 7, Kansas City's top tier in that one for sure. So, I mean, if you're the Chiefs, and listen, we know trades are certainly possible, so we'll see what happens. But let's just assume they don't trade. They've got a late first-round pick. They've got a late second-round pick. And then shortly after that second-round pick, they've got a high third-round pick. And then they'll pick again late in the third round. Kansas City's got some opportunities here. I was hoping they would have gotten a little bit more for Joe Thuney and more so for this year's draft class instead of next year. But listen, I mean, the guy's in his between early to mid 30s. I mean, you're not going to get much for an offensive guard at that age range. So I completely get it. But I think when you look at this Chiefs team in general, I don't like to tell fans how they should feel or what they should think. But I'm going to make an exception here. I'm going to break the rule. I urge you guys to trust Brett Veach on this one. Has Brett Veach let this team down? No. Listen, man, last year was a shitty year for the Chiefs when it came to the injury bug. And Brett Veach did not Brett Veach was trying everything. He saw the offensive tackles were not working. The two young guys who were both draft picks. He brought in DJ Humphries. We got excited, me included, but it didn't work out. They tried to do something, though. The wide receivers, obviously, that was hurting Kansas City. What did they do? They brought in DeAndre Hopkins. And again, I know DeAndre Hopkins may not have thrived statistically, but I think his presence alone made a huge difference because that's when you saw the turnovers drop drastically for Kansas City. So you know the Chiefs are always going to try something. We may not see the clear picture. Like with the Jalen Moore, I don't see a clear picture in that one. But has Brett Veach earned the benefit of the doubt from us at this point? Hell yes, he has. Keep in mind, Brett Veach, when he took over as a general manager of the football team, the Chiefs were in salary cap hellhole. Remember that one-off season? The Chiefs had $177 in cap space. He got the Chiefs out of that. He had to figure out a way to get the Chiefs out of the contracts of Eric Berry and Justin Houston because John Dorsey waited too long to sign those guys. Kind of like what the Bengals just did with Higgins and Chase. So when you look at this team right now, and I'm with you guys, the left side of that offensive line doesn't look wonderful right now. It's we've got concerns and questions there. And I think we're wondering, what are the Chiefs going to do in the draft? Do they go with an offensive lineman with their first pick, 31 overall, provided they don't trade up or trade down? Do they go with a defensive lineman to replace Treshaun Wharton? A couple of you guys were talking about Treshaun Wharton and how big of a loss that is. That's a major loss for me. Oh, Bob says, love to see Willie Gay come back. Yeah, the Willie Gay one is interesting because he was let go by the Saints. There are a lot of Chiefs fans campaigning for Willie Gay to come back. I think the last time I saw Chiefs Kingdom unite and campaign for someone to come back, I think was for Frank Clark. That did not end up happening. There were a lot of rumors that the Chiefs and Frank Clark had interest, but I guess they couldn't figure anything out. And I guess Kansas City ended up being right in that because Frank Clark has not been signed by anybody for quite some time now. He was let go by Denver during the 2023 season, I think it was. Yeah. So I don't know. It's interesting. Willie Gay, I think the Chiefs definitely missed him when it came to the QB spy. I feel like that's something that Leo Chenal is capable of doing, but they didn't utilize him more in that manner because you saw the Chiefs kind of have a difficult time containing Josh Allen and Lamar Jackson, and in a couple of other games last year. That's something where they definitely need to improve is the defending the quarterback and not letting them go off for big runs. Also defending tight ends as well. The linebackers had a very difficult time, as did the defensive backs. Whenever you saw Justin Reed go against the safety, he had a very difficult time last year doing that. Still miss him, don't get me wrong, but that was an issue last year. How much can Willie Gay help with that? I think you would have a really interesting group of linebackers if you bring back Willie Gay because you re-sign Nick Bolton, you have Drew Tranquill, and you have Leo Chenal, who, again, also from the 2022 draft class, who's been instrumental in helping the Chiefs on special teams and on defense. What does the future hold for Willie Gay? I don't know. Willie Gay's retweeted a few Chiefs fans who have been trying to campaign for him to come back. I mean, it's interesting. I know Donovan Smith was kind of doing something similar. Not that Chiefs fans were really calling for the team to bring him back, but Donovan Smith was kind of putting his name out there. But the report came out from Jeff Fedotin that he was kind of, I guess, not clear to play or was unavailable. But now he is and is hoping for a second chance with the Chiefs. We'll see what happens there. But Yeah, I mean, there are certainly some options for Kansas City to consider in terms of reunions there. I think it would certainly help Kansas City's defensive front with that loss of Treshaun Wharton, and I think that does get replaced with a draft selection in the first, maybe the second round. That'll certainly play a really interesting factor in what decisions Kansas City might have for the remainder of the offseason. We're going to take a quick time out here and talk about my friends over at SeatGeek. SeatGeek is where I go to for my ticketing needs, whether it's sports, concerts, any event that is available on SeatGeek. That is where I get my tickets. The nice part about SeatGeek is when you go through an event and look at the ticket prices, if there's a red dot, that means it is overpriced for that ticket. If there's a green dot, that means you're paying a great price for that ticket. SeatGeek keeps it nice and honest, and on top of that, if you're a new SeatGeek customer, you can put in my promo code FARZINE and save $20 off your first purchase from SeatGeek. Go to SeatGeek.com, pick your tickets, and new customers at checkout can put in my promo code FARZINE for $20 off their first order from SeatGeek. All right, final segment of the show here, and I do want to go around the NFL for a moment. Before we do that, let me just check out I know I have not read a lot of comments tonight, so I do apologize about that. Yeah, Karloff is the defensive end. What's the Stephon Diggs situation? I don't know, Scott, but what is he in his 30s? When you're in your 30s and you're coming off an injury like that, yeah, he's 31. He's going to turn 32 in November. That does become very difficult. I think he should stay in Houston. I mean, I think Houston's building something really good there. And, I know CJ Stroud did not take that big step forward from year 1 to year 2, but I still think that's a guy you want to build around moving forward. Definitely bring Willie Gay back, been parading Chiefs moves and supporting the team still, if you were to look at his social media. Yeah, I know Willie Gay, he put it out there, the update on Xavier Worthy, that he was cleared from any wrongdoing. So I thought that, I mean, listen, it's nice to see these guys show support. Obviously, Willie Gay still very connected with the Chiefs, you can tell. The AFC West is loaded with great coaches. Bob says it's getting tougher now, so we have to be ahead of other teams. Yeah, that's a really good point. I saw Colin Cowherd he put out his predictions for 2025. He has the Chargers winning the AFC West. So congratulations to the Chargers. They have now won the AFC West for the 10th consecutive offseason. I mean, listen, I guess you're going to be right at some point. If you're constantly picking the Chiefs to not win the division, which just seemed the Chargers are like this universal upset pick for a division pick, I guess you're going to be right at some point. But his division winners are Bills, Ravens, Texans, Chargers. His wild card picks in order: Patriots, Bengals, Chiefs. If I were to pick an upset in the AFC West as to who could dethrone the Chiefs, I would pick the Broncos before the Chargers. I think Bo Nix is for real, and I think he's going to take a nice sophomore elevation there and help the Broncos. I think he's really proven to be a good leader. I still remember when the Chiefs won that game on that blocked field goal, and Alex Forsythe just got so much shit from Broncos fans. Bo Nix had a really intriguing answer and kind of stepping forward and defending Alex Forsythe. And I'm sure the Broncos PR staff prepped him for it, which is fine. Even, a guy like Patrick Mahomes still gets help from the PR staff about certain answers that might be expected from potential questions there. But I thought the answer he gave was really professional, almost like a 10-year vet. So that was good to see. The Bengals, man, I mean, it looks like they're going to have the same team as last year, and I'll get to that shortly. The Patriots, I think the Patriots are going to make a big step in the right direction because of Mike Vrabel. I am really excited to see the Patriots team. I still have some questions about that Patriots team. I don't have an issue with the Patriots being a wild card pick. If I had to decide right now, do I think the Patriots are a wild card team? I would say no, but I don't think they're too far off. I think they're right there. I really do. As far as NFC teams, you had Eagles, Lions, Falcons, Rams, Commanders, Bears, and Seahawks. No Packers, no Vikings. That's interesting. The Bears are in, and the Seahawks are in. Yeah, the Seahawks are going to be a very interesting team. And let's get into the Seahawks right now because Cooper Kupp, he has joined the Seahawks on a 3-year, $45 million deal. Obviously, you do the simple math, they're averaging $15 million a year. You know, at first when I heard this, I thought about it. Cooper Kupp in his 30s, former Super Bowl MVP, but cannot stay healthy. The last time he had a full season was that Super Bowl season where he had almost 2,000 receiving yards and just dominated on the field. Listen, I don't know anymore what's considered underpaid, overpaid. I don't really know. I mean, there are a lot of people who think Patrick Mahomes is underpaid. And there are a lot of people who think Patrick Mahomes is overpaid, which is interesting because when you look at the top 10 quarterbacks in terms of AAV, average approximate value, Patrick Mahomes is not in the top 10, but people think he's overpaid, which doesn't make any sense. You can't be overpaid if you're not in the top 10 for average annual salary. But as far as Cooper Kupp goes, I thought about it. At first thought, I was like, man, that's too much for a receiver who's, you know, obviously not getting any younger. And I hate that saying because no one is getting younger. But I just said it. So I'm a walking hypocrite. But not just that. A guy who just cannot stay healthy. But then I thought about it. I mean, the Seahawks had to part ways with DK Metcalf, trading him to Pittsburgh. They let Tyler Lockett go. Maybe this is a better move than I think what some people are anticipating with the Seahawks. They obviously got Sam Darnold. That was a very interesting addition there. They got Marquez Valdes-Scantling. We know a lot about him. Jackson Smith and Jigba is there. I know he's not talked about as often, but I do think he's a bit of an underrated wide receiver. I think that's a good landing spot for Cooper Kupp. I mean, he's getting money that some teams probably would not have been willing to pay. And at the end of the day, you've got an opportunity on a rebuilding team. Now, would I call this team a playoff team right now? No, I wouldn't. I just wouldn't. But I do think they'll be a little bit more competitive than some might expect. That's an early prediction. Obviously, we know that can change. The big news coming from last night is the Cincinnati Bengals re-signing or extending rather Jamar Chase and T. Higgins. Higgins was under the franchise tag. They gave them 2 massive deals. What is the deal? I know it's $70 million combined between the two of them. On average, I heard Jason McCourty. He said all of the defensive backs in the NFL are scared, including Cincinnati, because they're not going to get any help. And I'll get into that shortly with the money here. So Jamar Chase has 4 years, $161 million. That's $112 million guaranteed. Higgins has a 4-year, $115 million guaranteed. So Chase's average annual salary is $40.25 million. I think T. Higgins is at $30 million. Yeah, this article does not say what. Oh, there it is. So Higgins and Chase combined are at 69 million, close to. Give me 1 second here. Yeah, so he's getting $29 million on average. Listen, I think those guys deserve those deals. Don't get me wrong. If they were not going to get it in Cincinnati, they were going to get it elsewhere. But you had this offense last year, and now you're paying a massive contract to Joe Burrow. You've got a massive deal for your number 1 and number 2 wide receivers. I mean, this is the most money a number 2 wide receiver has ever received. What's improved? Because I'm hearing people say, are the Cincinnati Bengals a Super Bowl contending team? What's different about them? Let's just assume they get Trey Hendrickson back, because I think there's some optimism on that front. You've got the same team back. I mean, it's good to have Trey Hendrickson, because if you don't have Trey Hendrickson, you do not have a defense. You have to score and hit a home run on every single draft pick. I mean, this draft is going to be very vital for the Bengals, and they have not gotten the draft right defensively. Ever since they drafted Joe Burrow, 9 of their 13 top 100 draft picks have been defensive players, and it has not panned out in their favor. But I'm just looking at this Bengals football team. Listen, I said this before. If the Bengals wanted to do this right, and if they truly believe Joe Burrow is the best quarterback in the NFL, and I know a lot of people in Cincinnati believe that, why not keep Trey Hendrickson, maybe Jamar Chase, trade Higgins, and upgrade on defense and offensive line? I mean, listen, I know Joe Burrow had by far the best year of any quarterback with a bad offensive line, but at times that still hurt the Bengals. Burrow's numbers could have been even better, and the Bengals could have won more games if they had a better offensive line. And if that defense was just average, they would have won more football games. I mean, they couldn't beat the Patriots. Burrow fumbles against Kansas City. They miss an extra point against the Chiefs, and then they commit a pass interference penalty at the worst moment possible. I know Bengals fans think that was a bad call, which it really wasn't. And then, some other moments as the year went on. I mean, this team, Tom Grassi, who does a really good job with his content, makes a lot of funny videos. He'll put on like the jersey of every team and will pretend to be like the fan of that team, and just like the reactions from that entire fan base. He put on the Bengals jersey and he goes, we're going to score 50 points a game because we have to. It's like, yeah, you're right. I mean, think of like the Chiefs 2000s team. Think of the Chiefs 2018 team. Remember the Chiefs 2018 team? They lost to the Patriots 43-40 one game, and then they lost to the Rams 54-51. I don't know, man. I'm not saying those players are bad and that they don't deserve those contracts. They do. It's just, you have the same team as last year. You finished 9-8 2 years in a row, and you've missed the playoffs both years. I mean, 2 years ago, Burrow missed half the season. Last year, Burrow played the full season and had the best year of any quarterback in 2024. And you still missed the playoffs. It's like, man, there's going to be a lot of pressure on this team. And not that you ever want to see an injury, but of those 3 guys, the 3 musketeers, if you will, Burrow, Higgins, and Chase, 2 of them are injury prone. I know Burrow didn't have any injuries last year. He didn't have any injuries in 2021 either when they made that Super Bowl appearance. But Burrow's had a very difficult time staying healthy ever since they paid Joe Burrow. The same offseason they paid Orlando Brown, they've missed the playoffs both years. Now you're paying Higgins and Chase. This is a lot of money for a core group, which, again, a great core group, but they haven't won a championship. They just had 1 Super Bowl appearance, and once upon a time, they went 3-0 against Kansas City. I mean, they have that on their mantle. And, oh, by the way, that was 3 years ago. So I don't, realistically, if I had to put money down, do I think the Bengals make the playoffs? Yes. Will they win the division? No, I don't think so. I think that I think the Ravens have earned that bet. But I just wonder, like, because again, if you're Cincinnati, the goal is to not just make the playoffs. This is a team that's investing a lot in their quarterback and their wide receiver 1 and their wide receiver 2 and possibly their edge rusher. And if you, I mean, those 4 or 5 guys, including Orlando Brown, who they paid last year, most guaranteed money, that's a team that is going to have 5 players take up a wide part of the salary cap. And I don't know if that team can really survive in the long run. I'm not worried about the salary cap or any of that stuff in the future. I'm talking about now. Like, get Trey Hendrickson back because you need him. But even with Trey Hendrickson, this defense was bad. Like, really, really bad. You had the league leader in quarterbacks with passing touchdowns. You had a wide receiver with the Triple Crown, and you had a defensive end who led the league in sacks, and you missed the playoffs. That's never happened before in NFL history. I don't know what kind of a team the Bengals are going to be. They kind of remind me of the Chiefs from the 2007 season where they had so many question marks. You knew there was potential, but you just didn't know how far they were going to go. And I'm not saying they're going to be a 4-win team like that Chiefs team, but boy, I just don't know what kind of, they're going to be great offensively, but they're going to have a lot of shootouts. I mean, that Bengals offense, they're going to have to really, really, really limit their mistakes. And I mean, really limit them more than ever. Like, one turnover, that could seriously be a difference maker. Your best hope is to hit on every single draft pick this year, going heavy on defense and offensive line. And I don't know if I trust that franchise to be able to do that kind of thing. Yeah, Denver is going to be a solid, tough defense. I mean, they led the NFL in sacks last year. That's a team that did a lot of really good things last year. And I think they're going to certainly elevate, especially with Bo Nix. 1 year of experience under his belt can really go a long way. Steven says, imagine keeping 2.5 Tyreek Hills when we let him go. That's what the Bengals just say. That's the thing. Like, the Chiefs, they trust Patrick Mahomes. Here's my question. Do the Bengals trust Joe Burrow? The answer is yes. But why, if you have that much confidence in Joe Burrow, why does he need both Chase and Higgins? And listen, there is no quarterback that will ever reject the idea of having the best wide receiver 1 and the best wide receiver 2 in the league. But you need to protect your quarterback. You need a defense to provide a balance. This is going to be the same team as last year. I don't know what kind of a season it's going to be. And this is a team that always starts very, very slow. I mean, you can sit there and say that, last year the Chase was not in training camp. Okay, but he was in past years, and they still have started slow. So I don't really know. I mean, this is not going to be pretty if their offensive line is not as good as it should be. Blake's asking, what do I think about Tyler Lockett coming to Kansas City? It sounds nice in theory. Oh, and you're a K-State fan? Makes sense. Oh, you're saying he's close to home. Yeah, I mean, listen, it'd be nice, but he's just not the same receiver he once was. That duo of Lockett and Metcalf was great at one point, but it's certainly been different. I mean, those two are just not the same players they once were. Maybe there's something left in the tank for DK Metcalf. The Steelers certainly think so. Which, by the way, I think the Steelers' offense is going to be better than last year's team. And you have the Baltimore Ravens. I mean, that's just, you can't ever count them out. I know they have a very unconventional style of offense with Lamar Jackson, but they've proved for a long period of time it can work as long as Lamar stays healthy. I mean, that's what that division has to deal with. That's what the Bengals have to deal with. And that division was not as scary as it was in years past. So, and they still missed the playoffs. I just don't know what kind of a football team the Bengals are going to be. That's a Matt Nagy thing. Yeah. I mean, Steven says the Bengals need to hit. Exactly. Yeah. That's the thing. When you're in a position where you have to hit on all of your draft picks, and that's not something you've done a good job of, I kind of worry for that team in general. I mean, that trio of Burrow, Higgins, and Chase, they're going to have to play damn near perfect football, which they did last year. But it's going to have to be even better this year. And it's really, really hard to duplicate that kind of success. And Trey Hendrickson is going to have another monster season. I mean, you're really relying on 4 players to carry your team. When the Chiefs traded Tyreek Hill, everyone thought the Chiefs were doomed. No, Patrick Mahomes won MVP with who did he have at wide receiver? He had Juju Smith-Schuster, Marquez Valdes-Scantling, Sky Moore, and midseason they got Kadarius freaking Toney. He won MVP with those guys at wide receiver, and his offensive tackles were not good that year with Orlando Brown and Andrew Wiley. And that Chiefs defense wasn't too great either. So, I mean, you have a team in the Chiefs that actually trusts Mahomes. Do the Bengals have that full confidence in Burrow? If they do, why pay those 2 guys? You could have traded one of them, more so Higgins, to get some help at the offensive line, but they chose not to. And I think that can come back to haunt them. That'll do it for this episode of the Chiefs Zone Podcast. Appreciate you guys joining me tonight. Reminder, no Red Friday live chat on Friday because of the NCAA tournament. So we'll have a second podcast later in the week. That'll be on Wednesday. I think Wednesday is when the tournament starts, but that's what the first 4 or whatever, which, by the way, how do you logically have the first 4 teams be a couple of 16 seed teams and a couple of 11 seed teams? That makes no sense. That's never made any sense to me. I think the 68 team bracket is stupid. They should have kept it at 64. I know there were rumors of having it at 96 at one point. I think that's way too much. But 68 sounds weird and dumb, especially with the way they do it. Yeah, KU, MU, there's a chance they play in the Sweet 16, but I'm not. Listen, I'm a Jayhawk. It has not been our year. Mizzou's having a really good year. They don't play defense, but they play great offense. They're like the Cincinnati Bengals. I mean, they play great. They play great offensively. A lot of people think Mizzou could be on an upset alert this Thursday. I hope not, but we'll see how it goes. Holly says Farzine for president. That is a disaster waiting to happen. Thankfully, I'm not eligible. But we'll have to see. All right. Hey, I appreciate all of you guys. Seriously, though, thank you all for the great comments tonight. I'll try to read more of the comments on Wednesday. So join me Wednesday, 7:00 Central. That'll be our second and last live stream of the week. No Red Friday live chat later on. A lot of things we covered here. We will do a more draft-centric type of conversation Wednesday. I know a lot of you guys have draft questions, draft comments. We will have that Wednesday night, 7:00 Central. I'll talk to you all then. Enjoy the rest of your Monday. Peace out.